Naina Kapoor thought she had found a way to survive in New York, but Richard Hale's obsession turned her secret affair into a deadly trap. Naina Kapoor had always dreamed of studying fashion in a city filled with bright lights, tall buildings, and endless opportunities. Growing up in a small neighborhood in Delhi, she imagined New York as a place where anyone could reinvent their life. When she finally received her student visa and acceptance letter, her family celebrated with pride, unaware of the struggles waiting ahead. Naina arrived in New York with 2 suitcases, a limited budget, and big hopes for the future. At first, the excitement carried her through every challenge. She explored her campus, took photos of skyscrapers, and shared everything with her family back home, pretending life was perfect. Within weeks, the reality of living alone in an expensive foreign city began to hit her. Rent in her shared apartment in Queens was high, groceries were costly, and part-time jobs paid barely enough. She worked late shifts at a small cafe, forcing herself to stay awake through lectures the next morning. Despite her efforts, the bills kept piling up. Scholarships were limited, and her family could only offer minimal support. Naina felt pressure to maintain good grades while also earning enough to survive, a balance that slowly pushed her toward exhaustion. Her roommates, who seemed financially stable, often went out for dinners or weekend trips while she stayed behind to work. She tried selling handmade accessories online, but the income was inconsistent. More than once, she considered dropping out, but the shame of disappointing her family stopped her. She began searching for faster ways to make money, scrolling through online ads late at night. Many options seemed suspicious, but desperation clouded her judgment. She didn't tell anyone about her growing financial problems, believing she could handle everything on her own. In her silence, vulnerability crept in, setting the stage for the choices that would lead her down a dangerous and irreversible path. Naina's late-night searches eventually led her to a private social app where young students connected with older, wealthy individuals seeking companionship. At first, she only browsed out of curiosity, telling herself she would never get involved. The profiles showed extravagant lifestyles, luxury cars, penthouse views, expensive vacations, yet something about the offers felt too convenient. Still, the idea of earning enough to pay rent, buy books, and maybe even save a little began to tempt her. One evening, after a long shift and a notice reminding her that rent was due, she created a simple profile without revealing much about herself. She thought she could just look around, but within hours, messages started coming in. Among them was a brief introduction from a man named Richard Hale, a 47-year-old businessman. His profile displayed polished suits, elegant dinners, and high-rise offices. Unlike the others, his message was polite, offering financial support in exchange for a discreet arrangement. He claimed he understood the struggles of students and preferred to help someone ambitious. Naina hesitated for days, reading and rereading his message. Richard didn't pressure her, he simply waited, sending short, careful replies whenever she asked a question. His calm tone made him seem trustworthy, and Naina convinced herself it was only financial help, nothing more. When she finally agreed to meet him in a public cafe, she justified it as a small step to see if he was genuine. Richard arrived well-dressed, carrying himself with confidence. He listened to her concerns and explained what he expected, offering allowances far higher than anything she could earn through her part-time job. The promise of stability felt like a lifeline. Naina told herself it would be temporary, just until she caught up with her expenses. She didn't realize that accepting his offer marked the beginning of a secret double life, one that slowly drew her into a world where money masked control. Naina's life changed quickly after accepting Richard's offer. At first, it felt like a solution to all her problems. He sent her money every week, enough to cover rent, groceries, and school supplies. He also bought her expensive clothes and accessories she had never dreamed of owning. Naina tried to convince herself she was still in control, that this arrangement was only temporary. But as her dependence grew, so did Richard's influence over her life. He insisted on choosing the places they met, often preferring luxury hotels where he could avoid being recognized. Every meeting came with another gift or transfer, making it harder for her to walk away. Gradually, Naina began missing classes because she felt drained and overwhelmed. She told classmates she was working extra shifts, but the truth was more complicated. Richard started asking her about her schedule, her friends, and her daily routine. He wanted constant updates, making her feel watched even when she was alone. At first, she assumed he just cared, but his questions became more intrusive. He grew irritated when she didn't respond immediately or when she made plans without telling him. His behavior shifted from polite to possessive, though always wrapped in the excuse of concern. Naina found herself living two separate lives. To her family in India, she was the hardworking student succeeding abroad. To her roommates, she was simply busy and tired. In reality, she spent more time managing Richard's demands than focusing on her future. She avoided telling anyone about him, ashamed of the choices she had made and aware that few would understand. Meanwhile, Richard's past remained hidden from her. She didn't know that he had been involved in similar arrangements before, leaving behind a trail of young women who felt used, controlled, and afraid. Without realizing it, Naina was becoming part of the same dangerous pattern, losing pieces of her independence one request at a time. Aisha had always known Naina as the quiet, hard-working girl who stayed up late studying and left early for her part-time job. That was why the sudden changes were impossible to ignore. Naina became distracted, often staring at her phone with a worried expression. She stopped joining the roommates for meals and sometimes returned home wearing clothes that didn't match her usual modest style. Aisha noticed the tension but decided not to pry, assuming Naina was dealing with academic pressure. However, the clues soon became too clear to overlook. One afternoon, while organizing their shared desk, Aisha found a stack of folded receipts tucked between notebooks. They were from upscale hotels in Manhattan, places far beyond a student's budget. Another receipt showed a purchase from an expensive jewelry store. Confused, Aisha examined the items more closely. Each bill carried Naina's name. Beside the receipts was a bank statement showing large deposits that didn't match her cafe salary. Aisha felt a knot form in her stomach as she wondered how Naina could afford such things. Later that evening, Naina rushed into the apartment, breathless and uneasy. Her phone kept vibrating, and she quickly hid it in her bag before her roommates could see the screen. Aisha watched her quietly slip into the bedroom, avoiding eye contact. When Naina went to shower, Aisha made one more discovery, an elegant necklace hidden under the mattress. It was delicate and clearly expensive, nothing like the simple accessories Naina usually wore. The secretive behavior, unexplained money, and luxury items painted a troubling picture. Aisha thought about confronting her, but fear held her back. She didn't want to upset Naina or assume the worst. She told herself she would wait for the right moment, hoping Naina might open up voluntarily. But before that moment could arrive, events were already shifting beyond anyone's control, leading Naina into deeper danger that even her closest friend couldn't predict. Richard's calm and generous behavior began to fade as soon as he sensed a distance forming between him and Naina. She had grown increasingly overwhelmed by the demands of their arrangement and the guilt of hiding such a significant part of her life. The money that once felt like relief now felt like a chain pulling tighter every day. She started thinking about ending the arrangement, telling herself she could manage with part-time work again, even if it meant living with financial strain. Although she didn't say anything directly, Richard noticed the shift immediately. Her replies became shorter, her excuses more frequent, and her willingness to meet him less certain. Richard's life outside the arrangement was already unstable. His marriage was falling apart, and his business had been struggling for months. He viewed his connection with Naina as the one part of his life he could control. Losing her felt, in his mind, like losing the last thing keeping him anchored. His obsession deepened quickly. He began monitoring her social media, noticing every break in routine. Whenever she went hours without responding, he interpreted it as betrayal. What Naina saw as simple distance, Richard saw as abandonment. He started showing up near her campus, waiting inside his car, watching from a distance. Sometimes he followed her after classes, careful to stay far enough behind so she wouldn't notice. He found ways to track her movements through the locations on her phone, something she hadn't realized was possible. His messages shifted from friendly reminders to sharp, demanding check-ins. He wanted to know where she was, who she was with, and why she didn't reply instantly. Naina felt a growing sense of fear she couldn't explain to anyone. She sensed eyes on her at random moments and found her phone behaving strangely. The independence she once cherished in New York was slipping away, replaced by the feeling of being watched and controlled. She tried to reduce contact gradually. On a cold and rainy November night, Naina finally agreed to meet Richard one last time. She had spent days rehearsing how to end the arrangement without creating conflict. The pressure of secrecy, the fear of being followed, and the constant anxiety had become unbearable. When Richard suggested meeting at a luxury apartment he had rented in Midtown, Naina hesitated but eventually agreed, wanting the situation to end quickly. She packed the gifts he had given her into a small tote bag, planning to return them as a symbolic step toward closing this chapter of her life. The building was a high-rise with polished marble floors and soft golden lighting. Security cameras watched every entrance and hallway, recording the exact moment she stepped inside. Richard was already waiting upstairs. He had prepared the apartment to look inviting, but his tense behavior revealed the turmoil beneath the surface. He paced the living room, checking his watch repeatedly, reviewing in his mind how he wanted the night to unfold. When Naina arrived, the atmosphere shifted. Her quiet, cautious demeanor only fueled his growing desperation. Hours passed inside the apartment, unnoticed by anyone outside. No neighbors reported noise, and no visitors came or left. The only proof of their presence would later be the silent images captured by surveillance. As the night wore on, emotions intensified. Naina attempted to return the gifts and explain her need for freedom. Richard, already consumed by fear of abandonment, saw her decision as a threat rather than a choice. His unstable mental state turned the conversation into a dangerous confrontation. By early morning, only one person left the apartment. Cameras recorded Richard rolling a large suitcase toward the elevator, his face calm and composed, his steps unhurried. He checked out without hesitation, avoiding eye contact with staff and leaving behind an apartment that held the grim truth of what had happened. Naina never walked out of that. When Naina failed to return home the following day, Aisha felt a deep sense of dread. It was unlike Naina to disappear without warning. She tried calling her several times, but the phone went straight to voicemail. Hours passed with no reply. By evening, the fear became overwhelming, and she made the decision to file a missing person report. The officers listened carefully, noting Naina's recent strange behavior, the financial inconsistencies, and the luxury items she couldn't afford. These details raised immediate concern, prompting detectives to begin their search without delay. The investigation moved quickly. Detectives accessed Naina's recent bank history, discovering large payments coming from Richard Hale. The transactions were frequent, consistent, and unusually high for a student. This financial connection made Richard the first person they wanted to question. When they attempted to contact him, he was unavailable, claiming to be traveling for business. His evasive behavior heightened suspicion. Detectives pulled security footage from Naina's apartment building, campus, and nearby public areas. The most crucial footage came from the luxury apartment building in Midtown. Cameras showed Naina entering the building late at night with a tote bag in hand. Hours later, footage captured Richard exiting with a large suitcase. Naina never appeared again. The building staff confirmed that only Richard had checked out the next morning, and no maintenance requests or complaints had been filed during the night. Investigators searched the Midtown apartment with a warrant. At first glance, the space appeared spotless, almost too clean. But forensic testing revealed faint blood traces near the bedroom floor and in the bathroom. Someone had attempted to wipe the surfaces thoroughly. Behind a removable panel, they discovered a cloth stained with blood that had been overlooked during cleanup. The DNA matched Naina. Detectives then searched Richard's home, uncovering Sever. The case took an even darker turn after Richard's arrest. Investigators dug deeper into his background, determined to understand how a respected businessman had become involved in such a disturbing crime. What they uncovered suggested a long history of manipulation. Richard had maintained similar arrangements with young women in the past, each marked by financial dependency, emotional control, and sudden disappearances when those women tried to distance themselves. Some had left the state, others had simply cut contact, but none had ever filed complaints. This pattern made it clear that Richard had refined his methods over years, choosing vulnerable individuals and keeping his secrets carefully hidden. Public attention surged once Naina's name appeared in media reports. Her family in India was devastated, struggling to comprehend how their hopeful, ambitious daughter had become the victim of a deadly obsession. As the case gained national attention, pressure mounted on police to locate her remains, both for closure and for the upcoming trial. Months of searching led to a chilling discovery: a hidden storage unit rented under a false name. Inside, investigators found Naina's body, sealed and concealed in a manner that suggested premeditation. The discovery erased any remaining doubt about Richard's intentions that night in the apartment. During the trial, prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence: financial records, surveillance footage, forensic results, and the storage unit lease. Richard's attempts to claim innocence collapsed under the weight of facts. Jurors learned how he had followed Naina, controlled her movements, and reacted violently when she tried to leave. The court concluded that his motive was rooted in power and obsession rather than impulse. Richard was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The ruling provided legal justice, but it could never restore the life lost. Naina's story became a stark reminder of how hidden,